The Oslo Plaza Hotel was a place of quiet luxury, its towering glass structure reflecting the pale Nordic sky, a symbol of wealth and discretion. Businessmen, diplomats, and well-off travelers passed through its grand lobby daily, each wrapped in their own affairs, expecting privacy in return. On May 31st, 1995, a tall, striking woman with dark hair walked through those glass doors, a black leather bag slung over her shoulder. She moved with purpose, her posture almost military in its precision. Her clothing was expensive but unbranded, a simple but stylish black blazer, well-fitted slacks, and polished shoes. She approached the reception desk, her face unreadable. "Welcome to the Oslo Plaza. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, Jennifer Fairgate." Her voice was low and controlled, with no identifiable accent. The receptionist typed in the name, finding the reservation. But something was off. Jennifer had not provided a credit card. No passport was scanned, no form of identification given, just her word. She wrote down a Belgian address in elegant but almost mechanical handwriting. The receptionist noted her neatly groomed nails and the absence of luggage. A wealthy traveler? A businesswoman? It was unclear. When asked about the lack of ID, she simply replied, "I'll provide it later." And then, just like that, she was handed the key to room 2805, a corner suite with a stunning view of Oslo's skyline. Jennifer Fairgate turned, walked to the elevators, and disappeared into the heart of the hotel. No one knew it at the time, but they had just checked in a ghost. Jennifer's check-in had been unusual, but nothing alarming. Privacy wasn't uncommon in high-end hotels. Some guests preferred anonymity, some didn't want questions. But Jennifer was different. For the next 2 days, she barely left her room. The cleaning staff never saw her, nor did she request any services. Her key card was almost never used, a detail that would become crucial later. The hotel's security cameras captured her movements a handful of times, always alone, always silent. She never lingered in the halls, never engaged with other guests. On the rare occasions she left her room, she was seen carrying a black plastic bag, clutching it tightly as if it contained something valuable. But when she returned, the bag was gone. Had she been meeting someone? By the evening of June 1st, Jennifer Fairgate had become an invisible guest, one who was present only on paper. Until suddenly, she wasn't. For 2 days, Jennifer Fairgate had been nothing more than a shadow in room 2805. No room service requests, no calls, no interactions. But by June 1st, the hotel staff needed answers. The Oslo Plaza had a strict policy. Every guest had to confirm their stay with a credit card. Jennifer had not done so. The front desk attempted to call her room, but the phone rang endlessly. Housekeeping made their rounds, knocking on 2805. No answer. They knocked again, waiting longer this time. Silence. The "Do Not Disturb" sign remained firmly on the handle. It wasn't unheard of for guests to avoid housekeeping, but something about this felt off. Most high-end travelers at least requested fresh towels or a minibar refill. By the next morning, June 2nd, the sign was still there. A decision was made. It was time to check the room. A security officer was called. He took the elevator up, walked the long, carpeted hallway to 2805, and knocked firmly. Again, no response. He announced himself, slid the master keycard into the lock, and turned the handle. The door creaked open. That's when he smelled it. Acrid, bitter, unmistakable. Gunpowder. The officer stepped cautiously into room 2805, his pulse quickening. The air was still. The thick blackout curtains were drawn. The only sound was a soft hum from the television, still flickering in the dimly lit room. Then he saw her, Jennifer Fairgate. She was slumped back against the bed, her upper body pressed against the padded headboard. In her right hand, a 9mm Browning pistol rested loosely gripped. Blood soaked the pillow behind her. A single bullet wound directly in the center of her forehead. At first glance, it had all the makings of a suicide. But something was wrong. Her hand, the way it held the gun, it looked unnatural, almost staged. And then came the detail that changed everything. The pistol was wiped clean. Not a single fingerprint. How could she have fired the gun, then erased all traces of herself from it? Had someone else been in that room? Had someone been in there right before the officer arrived? The moment detectives arrived at room 2805, the scene felt wrong. Jennifer Fairgate was still holding the gun, a 9mm Browning, her fingers wrapped loosely around the grip as if the weapon had simply fallen into place. But when forensics lifted it for analysis, something impossible was discovered. There were no fingerprints. None. Not on the grip, not on the trigger, not even on the magazine release. That shouldn't have been possible. If Jennifer had pulled the trigger herself, her prints should have been there, sweaty, smudged, unmistakable. A person doesn't fire a gun without leaving a trace. And then the second discovery. The gun had been fired twice. The first bullet was lodged in Jennifer's forehead, ending her life instantly. But the second bullet, it was nowhere to be found. Forensics tore apart the room walls, floors, furniture, searching for an extra bullet hole. There should have been one somewhere, but there wasn't. Had someone fired a test shot before staging the scene? Had Jennifer missed her first attempt? Or was there another shooter? The more investigators looked at the evidence, the less the story made sense. And then came the next chilling realization. Jennifer wasn't just missing fingerprints on the gun. She was missing everything. For a woman who had checked into a luxury hotel, Jennifer Fairgate left nothing behind. Investigators searched the entire room, drawers, closet, bathroom, but they didn't find a purse, no wallet, no cash. There was no passport, no plane tickets, no credit cards. Even her toiletries were missing, no toothbrush, no makeup, not even a single bottle of perfume. Her luggage, gone. And then something even stranger. Jennifer's clothing had been altered. Every clothing label had been carefully cut out. Her jacket, her pants, even her underwear, every tag, every identifying mark had been removed. Who does that? Most people don't cut the labels out of their clothes unless they don't want to be traced. Had Jennifer done this herself? Or had someone done it for her before she ever arrived? By now, one thing was clear. Jennifer Fairgate hadn't just checked into the Oslo Plaza Hotel. She had been erased from it. As investigators combed through the hotel's check-in records, they found something disturbing. Jennifer Fairgate hadn't checked in alone. Her reservation listed two guests, Jennifer Fairgate and a second person, Lois Fairgate. But there was no sign of Lois. No one at the front desk remembered seeing him. The electronic keycard records showed that only one key was ever used, Jennifer's. Security footage, nothing. Hotel staff, no one recalled a second person ever stepping foot in room 2805. Had Jennifer used the name as a cover identity? Was Lois a real person, someone who had checked in with her but left before anyone noticed? Or had he never planned on staying at all? The Oslo Plaza Hotel had nearly 600 rooms with countless places to disappear. If Lois had existed, he could have walked out that door at any time, blending into the flow of businessmen and travelers, vanishing into the city. But if Jennifer was supposed to meet someone, had that person ever truly left? Or had they been inside room 2805 that night, watching, waiting? and making sure she never checked out. The autopsy report should have clarified everything. Instead, it made the case even stranger. Jennifer Fairgate had died approximately 15 hours before her body was found. That placed her time of death somewhere between 8 and 9 am on June 2nd, which meant she had been lying there for nearly an entire day undiscovered. And yet no one heard the gunshot. That made no sense. A 9mm pistol is loud, easily 160 decibels, comparable to a jet engine at takeoff, in a quiet hotel hallway that should have been impossible to miss. But when investigators questioned guests in nearby rooms, they all said the same thing. They heard nothing. No loud bang, no muffled shout, no movement. One guest in room 2804, directly next to Jennifer, slept through the entire night undisturbed. If the gun had truly been fired in the morning, why hadn't anyone reacted? That led to a chilling possibility. Had someone used a silencer? Or had Jennifer Fairgate been killed much earlier, her body staged to make it look like a suicide? Because if she had been dead for hours before the gun was ever fired, that meant someone else had been in that room, waiting, moving pieces long after Jennifer had taken her last breath. Amidst the eerie emptiness of room 2805, there was one strangely ordinary clue. On the small wooden desk near the bed sat a hotel meal untouched. A sandwich wrapped neatly in paper, a bottle of soda condensation still faintly visible, but neither had been eaten. This detail sent a shiver through investigators. If Jennifer had been planning to take her own life, why would she have ordered food she never touched? Had she changed her mind? Or had she been interrupted? One possibility loomed over the case: she had been expecting someone. Had she ordered the meal for herself or for another guest? Did she let them in, sit down, maybe exchange a few words before something went terribly wrong? Or had she planned to eat, only to be stopped before she had the chance? The scene painted a haunting picture. Jennifer Fairgate had been in that room for nearly 2 days, locked away from the outside world. And then, sometime before she died, she ordered food. But before she could take a bite, everything ended. Was it a sign of hesitation? Or was it the last moment before someone pulled the trigger? The more police uncovered about Jennifer Fairgate, the less sense her existence made. She had no fingerprints in any database. Her passport was missing. Her clothes had no labels. Her name and address were fake. And most chillingly, no one came forward to claim her body. Not a single friend, not a relative, not a coworker. No one. It was as if she had never existed. This led investigators to an unsettling theory. Jennifer Fairgate wasn't a tourist. She was a spy. The details fit: the fake identity, the lack of belongings, the way she moved without drawing attention. Perhaps she had been sent to Oslo for a mission, one that went terribly wrong. Or was she eliminated before she could complete her task? If Jennifer Fairgate was a spy, that could explain the most baffling part of her death: the lack of fingerprints on the gun. Because if she didn't fire the weapon herself, that meant someone else had been in that room. Someone who had made sure she would never leave the Oslo Plaza alive. The deeper investigators dug, the stranger Jennifer Fairgate's identity became. Her passport was missing, her fingerprints were untraceable, and her address was fake. But there was one clue hidden in plain sight: her handwriting. When forensic experts examined the hotel's registration form, something stood out. Jennifer's signature looked too perfect. The letters were neatly spaced, almost robotic, with no natural fluidity. There were no hesitations, no corrections, as if it had been memorized rather than written naturally. Even her street address in Belgium, which didn't exist, was written in a way that suggested she had practiced it multiple times. Was Jennifer Fairgate even her real name? Had she been trained to sign it flawlessly in case anyone checked? Or was she forced to use a false identity dictated by someone else? Whatever the case, it was clear this wasn't just a random alias. It was a name she had to get right. The forensic report should have been routine, but instead it revealed one of the biggest mysteries of the case. The gun had been fired twice. The first bullet was obvious. It was still lodged in Jennifer's skull, the fatal shot that ended her life. But the second bullet, it was nowhere to be found. Crime scene investigators searched every inch of room 2805. They examined the walls, the furniture, the carpet, the ceiling, nothing. There was no second bullet hole, no exit wound in her body, no bullet casing lying on the floor. It was as if the second shot had vanished into thin air. This led to two terrifying possibilities. Had someone fired a test shot first? Maybe Jennifer had been forced to fire the gun as part of a staged scene before the real shot killed her. Was the second bullet removed from the room? If so, that meant someone else had been inside after she was dead, carefully cleaning up evidence. Because one thing was certain, Jennifer did not fire that gun twice. Someone else did. And whoever it was, they made sure to erase every last trace of themselves before slipping away. Time had frozen inside room 2805 quite literally. Among the few personal items Jennifer Fairgate had on her, one stood out: her wristwatch. It was expensive, not flashy, but high quality. A watch meant for someone who needed precision. When forensic experts examined it, they made a chilling discovery. The watch had stopped at exactly 22 minutes past 8. But why? Had it broken when she collapsed? Maybe the impact of the gunshot had jolted the mechanism, freezing the hands in place. In espionage circles, operatives often manipulate timepieces to create false timelines. If someone wanted to confuse the investigation, stopping her watch at a specific moment could redirect suspicion. If Jennifer's killer turned back the watch before stopping it, the police would have no way of knowing her real time of death. Which raises the question, was this an accident of physics? Or was this the signature of a professional execution? Jennifer Fairgate had checked into the Oslo Plaza Hotel with an air of quiet confidence, handing over her details without hesitation. But when authorities investigated her home address in Belgium, they found something disturbing. It didn't exist. The street name, completely fabricated. The postal code didn't match any real location. The name Lois Fairgate, the supposed second guest on her reservation. No records, no trace. She had built an identity from nothing, not just with a fake name, but with an entire fictional background. Why go to such lengths? There were only a few reasons someone would need a completely untraceable identity. She was running from something or someone. She was working for someone trained to disappear. She never existed at all, at least not as Jennifer Fairgate. But here's the real question. If Jennifer Fairgate's identity was fake, who was she before she walked into the Oslo Plaza Hotel? For days, investigators had searched for any sign that Jennifer Fairgate wasn't alone in room 2805. Then, a hotel worker came forward with a chilling detail. On the night of June 1st, just hours before Jennifer was found dead, a man was seen leaving the 28th floor. He was well-dressed, dark-haired, and moving quickly as if he was in a hurry to get out of the building. The witness remembered him because he didn't use the elevators. Instead, he took the stairs, a strange choice for such a high floor. Was this the mysterious Lois Fairgate, the second name on her reservation that no one had ever seen? Or was he someone else entirely, someone who had been inside Jennifer's room that night? Here's the part that's most disturbing. Security cameras should have captured him. But when police reviewed the footage, they found nothing. The main entrances, the elevators, and the stairwells, none showed a man matching that description leaving the hotel. Which meant either he knew where the blind spots were and avoided them. He left using a staff-only exit. He was never officially checked in, just like Jennifer. Had he come to meet her? To silence her? Or had he been inside the entire time, waiting for the right moment to slip away? Whatever the answer, one thing was clear. Jennifer Fairgate wasn't alone that night. At 12:30 am on June 2nd, Jennifer Fairgate made one final phone call. But here's where things get bizarre. She didn't call a friend. She didn't call room service. She didn't call an outside line at all. Instead, Jennifer Fairgate called her own hotel room. Why would someone dial their own number? There are only a few possibilities. She was trying to check if her phone was working. But why would she do that in the middle of the night? She meant to call another room, but misdialed. But Jennifer was meticulous. She didn't seem like someone who made mistakes. She was using it as a secret signal, a coded message for someone else in the hotel. Someone else was in her room and she was trying to reach them. What if she wasn't the one who placed the call at all? What if the killer picked up the phone and made that call themselves for reasons no one could understand? Whatever the explanation, it was the last action recorded from Jennifer Fairgate's room before she vanished from the world forever. After Jennifer Fairgate's body was discovered, Norwegian authorities did what they always do in these cases. They reached out. They contacted Interpol, sent descriptions to missing persons databases, and released sketches of her face in newspapers. Nothing. No one called. No one reported her missing. No one stepped forward to claim her remains. It was as if she had never existed. How was that possible? A young woman, well-dressed, clearly educated, speaking fluent English and German, just gone, without a trace of a life behind her. No parents, no siblings, no friends. Her fingerprints weren't on file anywhere, not in Norway, not in Belgium, not in any international records. How does someone live for decades without leaving any record of themselves? Even in cases where victims come from criminal backgrounds, there's usually some paper trail, a school record, a medical visit, a past employer. But for Jennifer Fairgate, nothing. And here's where it gets even darker. Authorities kept her body for a year, hoping anyone would come forward. No one did. Eventually, they buried her in an unmarked grave, her identity still unknown. It was as if someone had spent years making sure she could simply disappear. But why? Had she been a spy, erased by her own people? Had she run from something so dangerous that even her family didn't dare to search for her? Or was she never meant to be found at all? Despite all the inconsistencies, Norwegian authorities closed the case quickly. Their official ruling, suicide. But let's break that down. No fingerprints on the gun. A missing bullet. A fake name. No sound of gunfire. An entire identity erased. Does that sound like suicide? And the most chilling question of all. Why go through all the trouble of erasing every piece of your identity if you plan to kill yourself anyway? A person intending to end their life doesn't care about covering their tracks. They don't remove clothing labels. They don't erase their fingerprints. They don't invent a fake name and address before checking into a hotel. This was something else, something deliberate, something carefully planned. And yet, in the official report, there were no further investigations. Jennifer Fairgate's file was stamped, case closed. But the case wasn't closed at all. It had just begun. The case of Jennifer Fairgate should have faded into obscurity, another forgotten file in the archives of unsolved deaths. But something about it refused to be ignored. Journalists, investigators, and online sleuths have spent decades picking apart every piece of the mystery. Yet, no one has come any closer to finding out who she really was. Theories have surfaced, some believable, others almost too strange to consider. Was she a spy, working undercover until her mission took a fatal turn? Was she a fugitive, hiding from a past that finally caught up with her? Was she a woman trapped in something so dangerous the only escape was through death? Or was she silenced not by choice, but by someone who needed her to disappear forever? The evidence suggests one thing for certain. Jennifer Fairgate did not die alone. Someone else was in that room. Someone else handled that gun. Someone else erased her identity, making sure no one could ever trace her back to a real life. And yet, whoever they were, they left behind just enough unanswered questions to ensure the mystery would never be forgotten. Jennifer Fairgate's name was fake, but her death was very real, and it has haunted investigators ever since. The Oslo Plaza Hotel still stands today, towering over the city. Room 2805 is still there, just another suite among many. And yet, the ghost of Jennifer Fairgate lingers not in spirit, but in the unanswered questions she left behind. Who was she before she walked into the Oslo Plaza Hotel? Why was her identity erased so completely? And most importantly, who else knew she was there? Because one thing is certain. Someone out there knows the truth. Maybe it was the man who disappeared down the stairwell. Maybe it was someone who watched from a distance, making sure no one ever claimed her. Or maybe, just maybe, the truth has been buried so deep we'll never find it. Was this a perfect crime, or is the truth still waiting to be uncovered?